What does it mean to be a good listener, and how can we train visitor volunteers to be more skilled listeners? This is a difficult topic to train on because each community is unique, each visitation program operates a little differently than another, and each act of communication takes place in a different context or setting. As visitor volunteers, we must consider the way in which our surroundings and the detention facility context shapes the meaning of our communication. Today you will hear from 3 different program coordinators operating diverse visitation programs. Whether your visitation program operates during regular visiting hours, behind a plexiglass wall, or in a classroom-style group setting, each visitation program must be attuned to power dynamics. Because of our freedom and status in this country, we as visitor volunteers have more power than our friends in immigration detention. Therefore, it's important to let the person in immigration detention guide the conversation. We must give them an unthreatening, unhurried space in which to communicate, and we must remember that good listeners are comfortable with silence. Sometimes the most powerful moments in visiting someone are the quietest. The moment when you put your hand up against the plexiglass wall, separating you from your friend, and you hold that space with them.
It may sound, part of it is just listening, the ability to allow someone to speak their thoughts, to speak their minds, to take it in and perhaps on occasion repeat back to them what's being said. I think that shows that you are listening, and I think it sometimes helps them with getting clear on their own responses. I think showing empathy.
Really being open to others' experiences, being willing to listen and to let the others speak instead of necessarily feeling the opportunity or the necessity to respond right away. Being compassionate, having a caring heart, but then also really wanting to make a commitment to visit with someone who's in detention and to be able to make that commitment to visit regularly with the same person in order to develop a relationship. I think the other key quality would be to be able to pick up on the other person's cues and to get a sense for when it's time to change the topic.
As a person, you probably need to care about what they're saying and care about the person themselves. And they know if you care, and so they know, then they know you're listening. It's good to be open-minded because you're going to be different than that person, and just open to some things they'll say, and letting them guide the conversation.
I think the biggest part is some reflection back. Again, as the person speaking with you, reflecting back some of what they're saying. We spend a lot of time doing that. We are very careful to make sure that one introduces themselves properly, that you get the person's name, that you use that name in the conversation, that you not necessarily just probe and be willing to also give up some information about yourself as part of the conversation, so that it is a conversation, so that person is meeting you too.
We ask for volunteers to listen actively, to not feel as though when they're on a visit that they have to pick up specific information, specific details, but to really let the other person that they're visiting set the tone. So the other person, in our case, the women that they're visiting at the Hutto Detention Center, they will oftentimes share details of their story. And even though we provide a general outline for volunteers to think about and to look over before going on a visit, we encourage them to really not think of it as an interview. Really about encouraging the person that they're visiting to feel comfortable, to open up, and to remind the person that they're visiting that they're there as a showing of solidarity and friendship, rather than to provide any type of specific help or legal counsel.
The first time we visit, we will say our names and that we're with the Friends of Orange County Detainees, and then we'll ask them their name and let them know how we got their name. And chances are they've signed up through our program. We're allowed to put our sign-up sheets on the wall, and they sign up. So oftentimes they're waiting for someone to come and visit. So we introduce ourselves, and then we just tell them the purpose and the mission of our group is just to be there to help end their isolation and, become some kind of a friend and just talk and listen. So it kind of goes from there because every person is so different.
It might be a little bit awkward at first since they're two strangers meeting, but just to let the person know that they got their name through, in our case, a legal orientation program, so that they know that that's how they receive their information. And we also don't want to create any false expectations about what we're able to visit, so we also ask for volunteers to clearly state that they don't have the capacity to provide any legal counsel, but that they're simply there as a friend to visit and to provide accompaniment while they're in detention.
Hello, my name is. I'm a pastor. I'm a teacher. I work on immigration issues. I've come to visit you because I care about what's happening here, and I want you to know that there are people that know you're here and care about you.
Ask the person what they would like to be called. Sometimes people have 3 names or we can't pronounce them, but just, yeah, ask them. If you have trouble pronouncing it, ask them what's the right way to pronounce it, and then call them that from then on. It's nice to call people by their name.
We might ask about family. We might ask about the country of origin. We might ask about when and where they were picked up. And a lot of those questions open up a lot in the responses. I mean, any one of those questions people will take them and go with them. Sometimes you'll sense that they're just not going to go too much with a question, and you just sort of back off and ask another one. I'll ask about the food, how they're eating, how they're feeling, if they're feeling well. I'll ask if there's been any lockdowns in the facility. And I will sometimes start asking about those questions to sort of test their experience and how they're doing with it. Ask if they feel like they're being treated okay. I'll ask if they've been in any other facilities, if they've been transferred, either into that facility. All of those things, I think, become points of departure for other conversations.
To tell them a little bit about their hometown, what country they're from, if they have any family members that are either in their home country or in the U.S., and just more details about their background information, nothing too specific and never really pressing about specific details about their case, but just about their upbringing, their background, find out what types of things you have in common. Could be anything like what type of food they like to eat, what their favorite dishes, any activities that they like to do for fun, things that they're currently doing at the detention center, since at this particular one they can participate in different classes.
You know, as the visits go on and we get to know people better, I find that people can, or that I say at the beginning, what would you like to talk about today, or how was your week, or what did you have to eat yesterday, and as they start talking, and then if they're talking about their families, ask them about their kids, if they have kids, or are they in school, and then say, I have a child the same age, or kind of connect your own lives to their lives. And it's okay to have moments of silence. And
we're careful about asking too much about family, frankly. We're not able to do any contact with family on their behalf. And so we won't necessarily probe there a lot. And, I'm careful to tell people not, people have a right to privacy in the facilities. And I get, I might ask, but it kind of depends on the person. It's very situational.
We again remind them that they will be visiting people who, for the most part, are asylum seekers, and that they are survivors of some type of violence, and therefore there are certain conversations that they have that might cause the woman to tear up, to become emotional, and that's okay. What is discouraged is to keep pressing for that information, if it's something that the woman is visibly upset about and doesn't want to talk about anymore.
If they've had a visitor before, we don't just make them retell their story. I mean, very often, the first time you meet with somebody, there will be storytelling. If somebody comes in 2 weeks later and asks the same question, that becomes a re-traumatizing experience for that person. This is the second or third time they've met with a visitor. Learn enough about them that you feel like you can have a conversation. but be very careful about just making them tell their whole story over again, because by the time they're done telling it, there's really been no conversation.
We are careful to point out that a lot of the stories that the women will share, or the things that they've experienced, are traumatic for them, and that it can be very challenging if they have to continue to restate their stories.
We tell them that there's no real support system in place usually for detainees that have these issues. If they don't want to talk about it, don't push at all. Just, guide the conversation in another direction.
We do ask for our volunteers to be sensitive to body language, and even shifts in tone, shifts in expressions. If they notice that the person that they're visiting becomes more silent, starts crying, but seems visibly distressed, also to take note of that and to be mindful of that in terms of the topics that they're discussing.
Smiling is good, and showing that you're concerned, just by moving your eyes around, or showing you're concerned, or that you care, that something's made you sad.
We ask for volunteers to think of the visit as going to see someone who's a friend. This means not seeing it as an opportunity to encourage the person that they're visiting to think a certain way, to have particular beliefs, to sell them ideas, but to really be a source of support, to recognize that there is a difference in power between people that have to be detained there and those like ourselves who are visitors and have that privilege of leaving.
They're just there all the time. They can't go anywhere. They have no choices, really. And you have all the choices in the world. It's very important to be humble, and you're really privileged just by sitting across from them, and they realize that. So just be humble and let them initiate things, I guess, is the important thing.
A lot of our volunteers are members of the faith community. They're from different religious backgrounds, and the way that we ask for volunteers to be mindful of that is to refrain from speaking specifically about religion unless it's something that the woman initiates. So let them, again, take the lead in guiding the conversation, and if the topic of religion comes up, then the volunteer at that point, we encourage them to share. If they have a particular religious belief, certain practices, that's a good opportunity to share some information, to share some of your own story and details without making it seem as though our volunteers are there to proselytize or to encourage the woman to believe a certain way.
Once again, it's something that they would initiate, and if they do, it's very important to talk about that with them. And if we're not in a position to help them with their spiritual guidance they need, then we can refer them to a chaplain.
We would ask for volunteers to not make any false promises about when they can return, to be honest about whether or not they can come next week or in the next few weeks, so that, again, the women don't get their hopes up about how often you'll be able to see them there as a visitor and as a friend.
To be honest, and if you aren't going to be able to be back maybe for 3 months or something, let them know that. Let them know if you are coming back and approximately when, exactly when, if you know. And maybe if you're not going to be visiting, maybe you can write letters, but honesty is the most important thing. And definitely say goodbye.